thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman. Here's what we're looking at. Calls to invoke the 25th Amendment to remove President Trump from office are growing, following his threats against Iran. But what would that do?
Practice makes perfect, and that's how you really get really good at it, you know?
Two local James Beard Award nominees on what it takes to be a great chef.
We've come here, we've answered the call, but a few years later, we're getting deported.
And an exhibition explores the influence of Mexican railroad workers in Chicago. First off tonight, Chicago has a new deputy mayor for community safety after the high-profile firing of the last man to hold the position. 47-year-old Emmanuel Andre comes to the job from the Cook County Public Defender's Office, where he's currently the deputy of policy. Prior to that, he helped found Cook County's Restorative Justice Community Courts and Circles and Ciphers, a hip-hop-infused restorative justice organization for young people impacted by violence. Andre says he intends to double down on efforts to reduce crime and violence in Chicago using a, quote, restorative-based lens that addresses the root causes of harm. He starts the job April 20th and replaces Garion Gatewood, who was dismissed less than 3 weeks ago. The Chicago Federation of Labor and its allies are planning an economic blackout on May 1st in honor of International Workers' Day.
On May Day, we continue our resistance to the Trump regime to say that we must have a country that serves workers, not billionaires, and to demand ICE out of our communities.
They're asking people not to spend their dollars at big corporations they say have exploited workers, particularly immigrants, through low wages, poor conditions, and anti-union practices. A plan to memorialize the late civil rights icon Jesse Jackson Sr. by renaming the current Jackson Park after him could be forming, but it wouldn't happen very soon. Jackson Park is currently named after former President Andrew Jackson, who owned more than 150 enslaved people and forced the relocation of tens of thousands of Native Americans. City Attorney Graham Grady brought the request to the Park District Board at their monthly meeting today. Grady argues the name change takes on greater relevance as Jackson Park becomes the new home of the new Obama Presidential Center opening in June. The Park District says a person must be deceased for at least a year before a property can be changed in their name. Up next, calls for the 25th Amendment to be invoked are growing. A law professor explains how that could work right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by the Alexandra and John Nichols family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
The U.S. and Iran have agreed to a 2-week ceasefire, but concerns over President Trump's rhetoric on the war remain. It comes after Trump shared this expletive-laced post on Truth Social ahead of the ceasefire, threatening to attack civilian infrastructure in Iran, including power plants and bridges. And another one warning that, quote, a whole civilization will die tonight. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker recently joined the chorus of Democrats in his own social media post calling for the 25th Amendment to be invoked. Joining us now is Daniel Rodriguez, professor of law at Northwestern University. Professor, thank you for joining us.
Happy to.
So the 25th Amendment, it covers presidential disability, the process of removal, if it should come to that, and the order of succession. How did this amendment come about?
Well, it came about, it was enacted in 1967, and it was really a direct outgrowth of the anxiety that we felt, folks felt at the time, resulting from the assassination of President Kennedy. Now, although tragically President Kennedy really died at the time he was shot, concerns grew about what would happen in the case of presidential disability. This was not a new issue, and in fact, in two important times in American history, albeit a long time ago, there was long periods of time in which the president was really truly disabled. Woodrow Wilson in the 1920s was out of commission after a massive stroke for as long as 17 months. It wasn't widely known by the public, and the media, of course, was very different at the time. Years before that, James Garfield, who was assassinated, lasted 80 days before he died. And so there really was a concern about what would happen in the case of, in particular, presidential disability, and what kind of process would make sure that there was seamless, if not transition in government, then conduct of the executive branch during that period of time.
Then how could the 25th Amendment be used to remove a sitting president?
Well, so there are two sections of relevance, Section 3 and Section 4. We're most interested here, of course, in Section 4. Section 3 provides that the president might voluntarily relinquish duties for a short period of time. That's happened a number of times, beginning with President Reagan undergoing surgery, President Bush having 2 colonoscopies and relinquishing power, but that's voluntary, and the president certainly takes it back once he's back on the job. Section 4 is a provision by which the president can involuntarily be removed for office if, to quote the language from Section 4 of the 25th Amendment, if the president is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office. Let me briefly describe how it works. If the vice president and a majority of the cabinet, or an entity that Congress establishes instead of the cabinet, believes that the president is incapacitated, is unable to perform his duties, they issue a declaration. They send a note to the president pro tempore of the Senate and the Speaker of the House. Assuming nothing happens, the vice president takes on the duties of the president. That's a succession as acting president. If within 4 days the president disputes that declaration and says, no, I'm perfectly capable of performing these tasks, then it falls upon Congress to make a determination within 21 days of whether or not the president is unable and unfit to carry out those duties. And when I say it falls upon Congress, if they are going to decide that the president is removed from office, they 2/3 of the members of the House of Representatives and 2/3 of the Senate need to make that declaration.
Okay, that's a large amount. And then is that amendment, Professor, is it very specific when it comes to addressing what reasons a president might be removed for?
No, not at all. And indeed, if you look at the legislative history surrounding the adoption of that amendment, it seems that it was purposely left open-ended. Certainly those who were responsible for drafting and proposing the amendment spoke at great length about the prospects of physical disability, referring to episodes in the past. But a number of them also noted that mental disability would be a criteria for invoking the 25th Amendment, Section 4 of the 25th Amendment. One prominent senator said that if the president, I'm quoting here, is unable because of mental disability to make any rational decision, that would be a basis for removal of office. But they did not define in the text of the 25th Amendment the criteria for either physical or mental disability, or for that matter, anything about unable to discharge the duties of the office. They left it purposely open-ended.
Professor, what do you think is unique about today's calls to invoke the amendment compared to previous efforts to remove a president?
Well, what I would say is I would bring into this not only what's happening presently as of today, but really the debate that started after January 6, 2021, when there was then calls for removing through the 25th Amendment and later through impeachment President Trump, and the criteria there being he was certainly unable to. The argument was he was unable to make rational decisions, and there were calls for the invocation of the 25th Amendment. This is not dissimilar. I should say, in that the claim is not made, as I understand the arguments, and separate individuals and legislators, of course, can speak for themselves, have spoken not about physical disability primarily. Some have referred to mental disability, but the lion's share of the argument, and this does make it rather unique, is that this is just irrational action by someone who's incapable of making rational decisions, and that's quite unusual and unique.
Are there other ways beyond the 25th Amendment or impeachment to remove a president?
No, not unless the president voluntarily steps down. Those are the two ways in which the president is removed from office. And before the 25th Amendment, in the 1960s, the only way was through impeachment.
Remind us briefly, what is the order of succession if the president is removed?
Vice president, And after the vice president, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, and the President pro tempore of the Senate. And if I may just say very briefly, one of the reasons, the rationales behind ensuring that invoking the 25th Amendment requires not only the assent of the vice president, but also the assent of a majority of the cabinet is to counteract what some might regard as a coup on the part of the vice president. So in order to get all the way through to remove the president from office, it takes at least the decision of the vice president, but other actors and officers who would not personally benefit by the president being removed from office, as the vice president would.
So among those other actors, we mentioned that most of the calls so far to invoke the 25th, they are from Democrats. Are there other people, though, that you think if they were to lean in that direction, could they also tip the balance in favor of removal if they were to come out in support of invoking the 25th?
Well, it's a good question, a little bit above my pay grade, asking me to speculate about politics. But if I sort of try to combine the political reality with the structure, I think again, all roads lead back to the vice president. It's pretty hard to imagine. I mean, certainly structurally, the vice president has to assent to this to move it forward. So he's a necessary, even if not sufficient, condition. So I think the heart of the question is, are there folks who, in your words, who could lean into this, maybe members of the cabinet or other prominent members of the Republican Party, that could ultimately convince the vice president, and then he, in return, convince a majority of the cabinet to invoke the 25th.
That would.
The 25th
right.
Amendment.
And if they were to even get that far, of course, then they would have to go through the House and the Senate, which are still majority controlled by the Republican caucuses. Professor Daniel Rodriguez.
Indeed, and remember, 2/3.
2/3.
Yeah,
so
sure.
A lot of them. All right, Daniel Rodriguez,
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Up next, 2 Chicago chefs are cooking up their first James Beard Award nominations. Chicago has 3 new additions to the prestigious ranks of James Beard Award finalists. For the last 10 years, the awards, which recognize excellence, hard work, and tasty food and drinks, have been held at the Lyric Opera in Chicago, where they will return this June. The Beard Award is one of the highest honors in the U.S. culinary industry, and 2 of Chicago's finalists are here with us now. Joining us are Norman Fenton, the owner and executive chef of Carino. That's a Mexican-inspired restaurant in Uptown. It holds 1 Michelin star. And Jacob Potashnik, the owner and executive chef of Feld, a relationship-to-table restaurant in Westtown that also is in the Michelin Guide. They're both nominated for Best Chef Great Lakes. We also invited Chef Bailey Sullivan, who is nominated in the Emerging Chef category, but she's not available to join us. Welcome to the 2 of you, and congrats.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
So what does it mean to you to be nominated for this award for James Beard for Best Chef Great Lakes? I'm going to start with you first, Norman.
For us, really, it just is a validation of what we do in our mission at Carino and how we want to translate our experience to guests. We're very fortunate. We just do what we want to do at 4662 North Broadway in that little space right there, and people keep recognizing us and giving us that same just kind of fire to keep going and pushing and progressing our concept and our cuisine and our vision with our food.
I love the way you work in the address, in case folks want to know, in case they want to come and see you. Jacob Potashnik, what does it mean to you?
Yeah, I'm so lucky. I've got an incredible team at the restaurant, and these recognitions, it's cool that it's our name on them, but the restaurants are a group activity, they're a group sport, and so it just means so much that my team is being recognized for their hard work and for their support of what we've been working on.
Restaurant industry, competitive, challenging, obviously. What would an award like this, what would it mean for the business?
I mean, there's like very literal stats that you could go to of like it leads to X plus benefit, and we see that. I think we both have Michelin stars, and it led to really great things for both of our businesses. But I don't think we're in it just for the business of it. We're both. I don't want to speak for Norm. I'm just really thrilled about this thing and how much it means to us to get even just some form of recognition in an incredible city with incredible food like this.
Norman?
I mean, he could speak for me because I pretty much agree.
Said.
Yeah, I mean, it's just an honor to be recognized along some really fantastic chefs in the city that really represent the diverse culinary scene that we have here and continue putting Chicago on the map as a world-class food destination. It's really exciting to be a part of that.
What brought you to the kitchen? Why do you continue to persist in, as we've said, what is a competitive and a challenging industry? Why do you love it?
Oh man, I mean, I love being challenged, I guess, the pursuit of excellence for me, just trying to progress and be better every single day, focusing on a certain craft, Nowadays you have a lot of people that change their careers, do a lot of different things, back in the day people would focus on one thing, cobbler would do shoes, right? Blacksmith would do swords or knives, things like that, and practice makes perfect, and that's how you really get really good at it,
Jacob?
Yeah, I mean, it's the only thing I wanted to do since I was 7 years old. I wish I had a different career path sometimes. I'm just kidding. Sorry.
Well, what happened when you were 7 that you knew that this was what you wanted?
I think I'm one of those cliche people. Like, my mom was a great chef. Both my grandmas were really, really good cooks and did a lot of home cooking. And I just, all my positive childhood memories are around a table, shared in a sense of hospitality. And I think that really affected me from a young age. And I just knew this is where I was going to end up.
Feld won Best New Restaurant and Best Hospitality at this year's Bench Head Awards. That is, of course, a Chicago-based award celebrating culinary excellence. Congratulations on that as well. You weren't necessarily very well received in the online reviews early on, but you were able to overcome it, of course, because as you said, you did earn that Michelin star. But how did you work through that initial criticism?
It's so funny because you have two things, right? You have the external noise and then what's happening in the restaurant every single day. And what we were seeing in the restaurant every day was people coming in and being really happy and leaving, really loving the experience. And so that was so early. I mean, it really was like the first 2 weeks of being open. And I'm a first-time chef owner and made some mistakes and learned from them. But really quickly, I think we realized we were onto something special with the restaurant and what we were working on. And we just focused every single day on giving guests the best experience we possibly could and getting better every day and continuing to challenge ourselves regardless of what was the outside noise. And I think it really quickly paid dividends and showed. And really every review we've had since a month after opening has been glowing or positive. So, yeah.
Both of you were featured in the Apple TV docuseries Knife Edge, and that followed your journeys to earn that Michelin star. Let's see a little bit of that.
Achieving the Michelin star means not settling for the first thing. A lot of people, sometimes they make a dish, like, oh yeah, that's it, send it, it's done. But for me, I'm trying to look for the most perfect rendition of that dish that I think I can find. Still don't like it. It's too busy.
Norm has been developing this duck dish for months now.
I've been trying it 400 different ways already.
Norman, how do you know when a dish is perfect? Is it ever?
That's a weird question to ask me. I'm a perfectionist that doesn't believe you can reach perfection. So no, a dish is never finished. It's always evolving. It's always, taking a new form. So it's never perfect.
Never perfect. Always working on it.
Always working on it.
Jacob, Feld has had you have an incredibly unique dining experience, I should say. Here's a clip of you explaining your vision, also in the show Knife Edge.
Feld is different from most other restaurants because Feld is driven by product and not technique. And that means you're getting 30 small courses, minimalistic cuisine that really allows the product to shine. This is 3 Michelin star quality fish. A menu changes every day based off seasonality, what is coming in the door. That is the hardest way to run a restaurant. It's a very rare way to run a restaurant, and to me, it's the right way to run a restaurant.
30 courses. I'm concerned for your dishwasher alone. How did you come up with that idea?
We're driven by extreme seasonality, and to change our menu as often as we do, our food has to be a certain level of simple so that we can go to the market, pick up produce, and figure out that day what to do with it. I can't do 6-day-long processes on food like that. So it's driven by the idea of how do we take the best produce of the season of the moment and put it on the plate and let it shine like that. And as a result, as a default, to make that work, it is a longer menu with a lot of smaller, simpler bites.
You consider your restaurant a relationship to table spot. What does that mean?
At its core, we're a farm-to-table restaurant. But I just felt like the farm-to-table moniker had been adapted by a lot of restaurants that weren't really executing that properly. And so I wanted to come up with a term that really emphasized what we're doing, and that's we work directly with farmers and people we have visited and we know super well, and we tell those people's stories to our guests every night. So it's really taking farm to table sort of to the extreme.
Norman, this year there are only 3 finalists from Chicago. That's the fewest from this city, from Chicago, in quite some time. Do you think that's a reflection of the competition in other cities in the area, in our region, or is it a reflection of the challenges of raising a restaurant?
I think it's a reflection of the challenges of raising a restaurant. Chicago's a very competitive scene in general. It takes a lot of noise to be seen. And I think, James Beard is doing their best to highlight all of the noise that is being made throughout the entire region rather than just focusing on Chicago like they have in years past.
Jacob, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, echoing what he said, I think this is an incredible city, and we're both just lucky that anybody's looking at what we're doing, and to be a part of that, and is just an honor. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Congrats again to Norman Fenton, Jacob Potashnik. Look forward to coming to see you at your house also. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And winners of the 2026 James Beard Awards will be announced at the Lyric Opera in Chicago on June 15th. We're back right after this. Part of Chicago's identity is rooted in its railroads, but an important part of that history has long gone untold. In the early 1900s, Mexican railroad workers helped shape the city's infrastructure. Earlier this year, our Joanna Hernandez went to the National Museum of Mexican Art in Pilsen to learn more. Here's another look.
Literally 100 years ago, if a Mexican came to Chicago, you weren't taking an airplane and you weren't taking a highway because it didn't exist. You were literally taking the train, and when you landed in Chicago at Union Station or any of the stations downtown, the job that most readily available was a railroad job, or a steel job, or on the stockyards.
Meet Ismael Cuevas, co-creator of Rieles y Raíces. The exhibition takes a closer look at a time Mexican workers were in high demand, and the roots they planted still shape these communities today.
This is an example of a newspaper, the Burlington Railroad, going to Mexico and asking Mexican workers to come work in Chicago and across the Midwest.
A collection of photos reveals the lives families built in Chicago and its suburbs. Census records help trace some of those families to boxcar settlements along the tracks.
We were able to find Mexicans living along boxcar communities right by Midway Airport, in Inglewood. We found boxcar communities near Blue Island, even as far south as, for example, on 75th and Western in that big railroad yard.
Maps, photographs, and personal finds show how communities carry their culture with them.
For example, they built a chapel in that boxcar community, and that image of La Virgen de Guadalupe is the same image that was hanging inside of that boxcar 100 years ago in Aurora, Illinois.
It's a passion project, he says, led him to uncover a personal family connection.
My grandpa told me that I had a great uncle who worked in the railroad, and he was based out of California. So I'm thinking I was going to find a document from California. So I ended up finding this document, and it says that he was a section laborer in 1926 to 1932 in the maintenance of way department in Ottawa, Illinois. So literally about an hour away from here, I had an uncle who was living here with his family.
The exhibit explores World War II and how a massive labor shortage sparked the Bracero program, bringing millions of Mexican workers to farms and railroads across the country.
This is literally a magazine from 1943. And you have literally in the magazine, this is a bilingual magazine that they chose for this edition, it says Soldados del Ferrocarril, soldiers of the railroad. So while we have soldiers abroad fighting the Nazis, we have soldiers internally making sure that our supplies were getting delivered.
You said this was a time where America embraced the Mexican community.
Mexicans were being embraced during this era because they needed to fulfill that labor shortage. Now, what is really drastic and almost hypocritical is that a few years later, when we get to after the wartime period, we go into the 1950s, and that's when we have Operation Wetback.
A photo shows ICE agents deporting Mexicans along the same railroad tracks Cuevas says Mexican laborers helped build.
And we're literally seeing a moment in history where history is repeating itself. Deportation campaigns happened in the 1930s, deportation campaigns happened in the 1950s, and they're happening today. And it's really important for us to see that we literally have examples of traqueros, of these Mexican railroad workers in Chicago who had bought homes. And a few years later, they're dealing with getting deported and are writing letters to their loved ones, checking up if the house is still standing, if they're still be able to, are paying the mortgage of the house.
Cuevas hopes uncovering this piece of history inspires others.
This is not just about railroads. I hope that, youth come here, boys and girls of all kinds, and get inspired to do digging in of their history, and someday they'll have an exhibit.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Joanna Hernandez.
The exhibition is free at the National Museum of Mexican Art in Pilsen. It runs through April 26th. And we're back to wrap things up right after this.
Reflecting the people and perspectives that make up our communities, this story is part of Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices.
And that's our show for this Wednesday night. Join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 10. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that is a multilingual law firm, providing translators for a variety of languages.